Okay, let's dive in. Here's the premise we're starting with. What if the most unbelievable conspiracy theories you've ever encountered, they weren't just, wild speculation, what if they were actually fragmented glimpses of a much bigger, much darker truth? A truth buried deep inside classified government documents.
That's exactly the territory for this deep dive. We're digging into a collection of recovered materials, stuff like CIA field reports, these really chilling M-Culture logs, autopsy records too, encrypted transmissions, even data apparently pulled from black site archives, and, get this, lunar relay data cores.
Yeah, these aren't just random forum posts. The sources claim these were pieced together from something called Operation Shatter-point Delta, basically declassified files that were never meant for public eyes.
And they all seem to point towards one central, almost, well, unbelievable topic, Project Veil. The documents lay it out as this covert alliance operating roughly between 1947 and 1960. It supposedly involved U.S. intelligence agencies and extraterrestrial entities.
Right. So our mission here is to try and cut through decades of buried info. We want to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights from these fragmented sources, to try and figure out what was Project Veil, who was really involved, and maybe what was its true kind of unsettling purpose.
It really does seem to circle back to this one core idea, almost a question that the documents themselves keep raising. Who controls the DNA?
Well,
Who controls the species?
okay, let's unpack Project Veil then.
Yeah.
Where do these documents say it all kicked off?
The materials point right to Wright-Patterson Airfield, 1947, specifically something called Operation Marlowe. This seems to be where that initial really shocking bargain was struck, the one that set this whole thing in motion.
A bargain. What kind of bargain are we talking about? And who was involved?
According to these reports, a Colonel Jensen was the main figure. He was in Hangar 18, meeting with entities the documents describe as the Greys. And the files detail this exchange. Jensen apparently had a briefcase, and inside was what the Greys wanted: genetic material.
Okay, and this is where the reports get really, really disturbing. The sources are pretty explicit about where that material came from, aren't
Oh, absolutely. The documents state it included blood from Tuskegee subjects, ova taken from asylum patients described as volunteers, and sperm harvested from soldiers who were just deemed expendable. It's horrific detail right there in the files, a human cost that's just staggering to think about.
And for that, what did the U.S. agencies get in return?
Alien technology. The sources say blueprints were exchanged. They reveal three key pieces of tech. First, Kerhassel described as a lunar relay station, then something called spectral fission, identified as a reactor core, and finally, the Van Allen distortion.
Which the reports say was actually the Veil's shield mechanism,
Yeah.
later just presented to the public as, natural radiation belts.
Exactly. A cover story. And the detail in the sources about the Greys' perspective is fascinating. They apparently told Jensen explicitly to anchor the machine to the moon. And their take on human ignorance, the reports quote them calling it efficient.
Wow. Efficient. Like
Yeah.
our not knowing was actually useful to them.
Pretty much. And the documents also mention, even this early, references to reptilian collaborators and something called their rogue faction. It suggests this wasn't just a simple two-way deal, it was more complex. Other ET groups involved, maybe with their own agendas.
Okay, so they've got the tech. They've made this awful trade for genetic material. The next big piece the sources highlight jumps forward a bit to 1948. Site Alpha in Nevada gets set up, and we meet a really crucial figure, Asset L9, also known as Lisa Marlowe. Who was she, according to these files?
The documents ID her as the first stable human NTE hybrid, NTE meaning non-terrestrial entity. Her origins detailed: human father, an OSS operative apparently, but an unknown extraterrestrial donor. And crucially, a successful full memory wipe. Her impact was immediate. The records show her presence slashed hybrid rejection rates in later trials by something like 74%. Pretty amazing.
And that connection seems even clearer when you look at this recovered transmission, right? Council transmission, hashtag 1LPHA. What does that one say?
It reads, Akashic integration, 98% stable. Federation sensors detect no anomalies. Proceed with Phase 2, surface reclamation. Now, Akashic integration, that seems to be the program's term, according to these files, for plugging the hybrid consciousness into the Veil system. So this confirms that early stability, probably thanks to Lisa, and it hints at this ominous Phase 2 the Greys were planning. Surface reclamation. Sounds bad.
The sources then take us inside the facility itself. Site Alpha Sublevel 7, 1949. What did the records say was going on down there?
The descriptions are pretty unsettling. Incubation tanks, filled with gray-dominant hybrids. Many looked eerily human, but not quite. But the documents also note some showed faint reptilian traits, things like scales, slit pupils, even claws sometimes, hinting again at that complex mix maybe involving those reptilian collaborators.
And Lisa's role in this place, it's specific and kind of chilling, isn't it?
It really is. The records show she was used to stabilize the unstable ones, like this group called Batch 12. And it wasn't tech doing it, it was her voice. The sources say her voice was synced to the Veil's 12 hertz hum, and just by her speaking or humming, it cut aggression in these volatile hybrids by 89%.
Wow.
Yeah, like she was the Veil's living tuning fork, able to resonate with this alien system.
The documents also give us this glimpse of the dynamic between Jensen and Cathorn, that reptilian liaison mentioned before. What did Cathorn tell Jensen?
Cathorn's communication is described as telepathic in the reports. They apparently told Jensen something quite revealing about the alliance. The reptilians provide the strength, the Greys provide the surface. And their view on Lisa, they called her an accident or a miracle, suggests even the reptilian partners weren't totally sure what she was or why she was so unique.
One of the most interesting points is Lisa's first documented moment of unsettling awareness. What did the sources say she experienced?
Her mind is described as sort of brushing against another hybrid's consciousness, and she felt intense pain, confusion, and this awful, raw hunger. Her stress markers apparently spiked right off the charts. It suggests she was starting to develop this psychic link not just to the Veil tech, but to the hybrids themselves, feeling their raw experiences.
Okay, moving to 1951. Lisa makes a discovery in the Site Alpha archives. This feels like a huge turning point in her story based on these records. What did she find?
Yeah, big time. She finds this photograph. It's of her father, identified as OSS Operative Redacted. And he's at this event back in 1938 called the First Contact Accord. And he's not alone. He's pictured with an Ashtar emissary.
Ashtar. So that connects her family history to something potentially much older than Project Veil, maybe linked to this Galactic Federation mentioned in another file.
Exactly. A different group, maybe a different kind of interaction. And the archives didn't just have the photo.
Right. They also had blueprints for the Kerr-Hassel tech, the lunar relay.
Yes, and the blueprints explicitly label Kerr-Hassel as Galactic Federation tech repurposed. So the public story was Van Allen belts. The internal story was gray tech. But these documents suggest the truth was even deeper advanced tech from another group, co-opted by the Greys.
Which ties into another file mentioned, Federation Directive 7 Alpha. It's mostly redacted, but what hint does it give about the Federation's view?
According to the memo fragments, Federation non-intervention protocols were supposed to be active. But the Veil's distortion field was exceeding parameters. It mentions humanity's sovereignty. Then it's redacted. But it strongly implies the Federation saw Project Veil as something gone wrong, a violation of their rules.
And around this time, Cathorn appears to Lisa in the archives. The reptilian tells her something crucial, according to the reports.
Yeah, Cathorn apparently tells her they fear what she is. That the original Federation tech was pure, just a shield, but the Greys broke it. And crucially, Cathorn says she unbreaks it. The documents quote Cathorn calling her the only hybrid they couldn't corrupt or digest. She's the key, the lockpick.
And Cathorn shows her a vision.
A vision, yeah. Described in the reports as the moon, but as a reptilian citadel being destroyed by the Greys. And Kerr-Hassel activating to erase history, cover it all up. It paints this picture of a hidden war between the Greys and this reptilian faction, with Lisa and the Veil tech right in the middle.
And there's an epilogue note from 52 in the sources that confirms Lisa was already seen as a problem. Jensen and Richter discussing her.
Right. The note shows them calling L9 a glitch, something unexpected messing with the plan. And the council wanted her scrubbed, eliminated before Kerr-Hassel went fully online. They saw her uniqueness as a direct threat.
Okay, so that sets the stage, the bargain, the hybrids, Lisa's unique role, the tech. But when does this Veil thing actually go live, and what happens then?
Well, the sources actually step back a bit first, pointing to an even earlier trigger point. Not the 47 bargain, but July 1945. Operation Crossroads, White Sands, the Trinity to Second Atomic Test. And the documents claim this test was overseen by the Grey Council. And right after the flash, there was this anomaly, a stratospheric fracture. The Council envoy supposedly declared, Phase 2 initiates, prepare the anchor. Later files confirm the anchor meant Kerr-Hassel.
So the dawn of the atomic age wasn't just our achievement, it was like flipping a switch for them, for Project Veil.
Seems that way. Then you get Operation Knock-Schwartz, or Knock-Nabel, documented in 1951. What was that one about?
That involved digging into captured Nazi research, specifically something called Project Knock-Nabel. The goal was apparently to use Nazi findings on hybridization to help stabilize the Veil.
And the findings recorded in these files are pretty stark. They found 74% of recovered Nazi scientists showed signs of reptilian hybridization, linked to gray serum given way back in 1936.
And subject A12, identified in the docs as Adolf Hitler. His DNA is noted as 18% non-human. What did the analysts conclude from that?
The conclusion in the sources is chilling. They decided the whole Nazi Ashtar Pact wasn't really about power or war for the Nazis. It was a long-term, gray eugenics trial. And a critical discovery. The Veil, they realized, needed hybridized souls to function correctly. It wasn't just passive tech. It actively fed on something specific.
Which brings us right to the activation of Kerr-Hessel in 1957. Watched from Wright-Patterson. What did the report say about what it really was and what happened?
The records clarify, Kerr-Hessel wasn't just equipment on the moon. It basically was the moon, or rather an asteroid ship they called the Soul Forge. And as the Veil hummed to life, the sources document this immediate, widespread cognitive degradation down here. The examples cited are just bizarre and terrifying. Soldiers forgot their names. Wives miscarried clocks.
Clocks. Wow.
Wow.
And Jensen's reaction at this point, recorded in his logs.
Yeah.
What did he finally realize?
Looking at the data feeds, he wrote, "It's not a shield, soul cycled, memories erased. They weren't saving the species, they were farming." Yeah, a fundamental shift. The Veil wasn't protection, it was harvesting. Using human consciousness like a crop.
There's a flashback in the files that kind of underscores this horror. An encounter in Berlin, 1945. A Nazi surgeon aligned with the reptilians.
Oh yes, and a hybrid child who gives this prophecy, "You'll feed us all soon." And that echoes decades later in a 1982 decrypt of a council transmission, #9LHA. Human consciousness exhibits anomalous resilience. Accelerate hybridization protocols. Suggests they were having trouble. The crop wasn't compliant enough. They needed to speed things up.
Which leads, tragically, to the first harvest. Operation Reaper, 1957, at Nellis Air Force Base. What did these operations involve, according to the files?
The reports talk about using human volunteers, basically soldiers, convicts, vagrants, people who wouldn't be easily missed. The process is described brutally, machines peeling minds like grapes.
And Dr. Richter's log entry from that time, it's incredibly cold. What did he write?
Yeah, his log says, like radio static, cleaner than bullets, back to the start. The Veil scrubs them, repackages them. Next life, they'll be patriots. Or fertilizer, depends on the harvest.
Repackages them, my God.
Yeah.
Just recycling consciousness, wiping identity.
Exactly. And right in the middle of this, the documents introduce this kid, subject Delta 7. A 12-year-old, Barnes L. He somehow breaches Site Alpha in 57. What did he see or claim?
He claimed he could see council operatives right through 3 feet of concrete. And he said, the tall ones want to wear my skin. His abilities immediately flagged him.
So what happened to him?
The documents record his immediate transfer to M-Cultura. The goal, neural fracturing, break him down.
And this whole horrifying section of the documents ends with this really unnerving event at midnight 1957.
Yeah, an Enochian broadcast seems to mean some kind of alien or non-human language transmission that cut across TVs everywhere.
The message was just, the cattle seeks the slaughterhouse. And the source is identified in the reports as a hybrid child. Jensen's reaction is noted as being deeply disturbed. It wasn't staying secret anymore. Okay, so the Veil is up. The harvest has begun. What do the records show happening next in 1958?
We go back to Site Alpha, the hybrid nursery, and Lisa, L9. She's still doing her job, stabilizing Batch 14, suppressing their aggression by 98%. But the reports start noting anomalies with her.
Like what?
Things described as transient physiological deviations, specifically pupillary reptilian morphogenesis.
Meaning her eyes briefly looked reptilian.
Apparently. And she was also recovering memory fragments. The quote recorded is, "Your mother. She wasn't human. She's starting to remember or uncover her own origins."
But interestingly, there's this council transmission, #7LAPHA, also from 58, about L9, and it says her metrics remain optimal, no anomalies detected. That doesn't match the U.S. files at all.
No, it's a direct contradiction. Either the council's own monitoring was flawed, or they were being deliberately misled, or maybe just ignoring things that didn't fit their model.
While this is happening with Lisa, Colonel Jensen is apparently playing what the documents call a double game. Operation Forgery, 1958. What was he up to?
He was digging into old OSS files. And that's when he finds that photo of L9's father at the 1938 accord with the Ashtar emissary.
Ah, so Jensen confirms her Federation link independently.
Exactly. It totally contradicts the gray narrative about her origins. And Jensen doesn't just find it.
What does he do?
The documents say he replaces the original photo with a forgery, hiding the real evidence. And he starts using Catharn's fractal code, the reptilian resistance code etched into his lighter. It signals he's actively collaborating with them against the Greys.
Fractal code, like a specific pattern or frequency they use.
Seems like it. And this leads to a direct action documented later in '58, the Kerr hostile sabotage attempt. Jensen does something specific.
What did he manage to do?
The files detail him inserting an unauthorized device described as Catharn's virus, or maybe microfilm, right into the spectral fission core during an activation cycle. The monitors apparently glitched, just for a second.
And that glitch, it had immediate effects elsewhere. The sources connected.
Yeah, big time. Back at Site Alpha, Lisa jolts awake, nose bleeding. And in the M-Culture lab, Barnes starts screaming, "The moon's a lie! It's eating us!"
Wow. So they're psychically linked to the Veil system and Jensen's sabotage.
That's what the files imply. Their unique connection made them sensitive to disturbances in the system. And then comes crucial confirmation. Lisa's DNA analysis from 1958.
What did that finally show?
Human, 52%. Gray, 34%. And the clincher, 14% unknown. But that unknown portion matched Federation archives, specifically identified as Ashtar-7, confirmed Federation origin. She's not just a Gray hybrid. She's tied directly to the group the Veil was supposedly hiding us from.
And while all this is going on, Lisa was reportedly doing something strange at Site Alpha while vacant.
Yeah, the files say she was carving Catharn's fractal patterns into the infrastructure around Site Alpha. Walls, floors, whatever.
And these patterns, they did something.
They emitted a harmonic resonance with the Veil, according to the reports. So maybe unconsciously she was actively interacting with the Veil, maybe disrupting it, using the Resistance's own methods.
Okay, moving into the final documented years, 59-60. What happens to Barnes, the boy in M-Cultra?
By 1959, the records show he's deeply integrated. Shackled, gray reptilian grafts physically implanted in his scalp. Dr. Hallstrom is quoted chillingly saying his clairvoyance isn't an illness, it's a tool for them to use.
But he was still having visions. What was he seeing?
Recurring visions of Lisa's resonance actually fracturing the Veil, confirming his earlier scream, "The moon's a lie!"
And despite the conditioning, he resisted.
The reports note he sent unauthorized psychic transmissions to Lisa. Just the words, "You're the key." Some part of him was still fighting.
While they're repurposing Barnes, the program has this apparent success in 1959. Batch 22 is deployed, called the Hybrid Program's Triumph.
What made them a triumph?
Described as sleek, gray dominant, their reptilian DNA markers were successfully smothered or minimized. Aggression was near zero, obedience near 100%. They looked like the perfect compliant workforce. But there was an anomaly noted, right? Something the council missed or ignored.
Yes. Residual resonance patterns were detected in Batch 22, patterns directly linked to exposure to L9, to Lisa.
And the council just dismissed it.
Called it background static, according to the files. A potentially huge oversight.
And this Batch 22 gets deployed. Where?
To key government and military posts, essentially infiltrating the power structure with these seemingly obedient hybrids. But the later declassified files still mark their long-term stability as TBD, to be determined.
So they put these potentially compromised hybrids into key spots, not realizing the static might be important.
Exactly. And another council oversight failure is highlighted in '59 related to Curacao monitoring.
What did they miss there?
While they were dismissing Lisa's resonance near the Soul Forge, the documents show Catharn's Antarctic obelisk. The reptilian faction's base was actively broadcasting Lisa's fractal code.
Broadcasting it. With what effect?
The bizarre side effect recorded was it warping penguin migration patterns nearby. But the implication is Catharn's group was actively using Lisa's frequency as a weapon or disruption tool against the Veil, far from the Grey's main hub.
Coordinated resistance, using her unique signature.
Okay, then Operation Ashes, 1960, White Sands. Jensen makes one last move documented in these files.
Yeah, the records detail Jensen passing Catharn schematics, maybe plans, maybe more code to Barnes, hidden in a matchbook cipher.
And the message.
Keep looking! Jensen's ultimate loyalty is still marked indeterminate in the files, but he clearly wasn't playing for the Grey Council's team anymore. He armed Barnes with resistance intel.
And this phase of the operation ends with an epilogue note. 1960, Jensen and Barnes together.
Under the Veil's aurora, yeah. And Barnes delivers this final, chilling line.
What does he say? Looking up, he says, "The Veil's a coffin. They just don't know it yet." Like, the system they built to control was already dying or flawed, maybe because of Lisa, maybe because of the consciousness they tried to erase.
And the sources even follow Barnes later. Decades later.
Fragmentary reports, yeah. Like from a 1980s bunker. Describe him as a hollow-eyed oracle, still whispering Lisa's frequency into a ham radio.
And did he get a response?
The response documented, caught in the static. Cattle remembers.
Yeah.
Chilling. Suggesting that even after the scrubbing, the harvesting, something survived. Memory, consciousness,
Right.
triggered maybe by her frequency.
And finally, there are these classified CIA memos from 5960, declassified much later. They basically confirm the internal U.S. view.
Yeah, they confirmed the operational impact. L9's resonance was measurably degrading veil stability, about 0.7%. Barnes was seen as a disinformation threat because of what he saw, and the Council's ignorance was considered a liability.
And their recommendations.
Pretty cold-blooded and pragmatic. Isolate L9 at Curris Hall, keep Barnes under Cultura, and plan to terminate Barnes after 1980. They saw the cracks, but the plan was containment, not really understanding what they were dealing with. So wrapping this up, we've followed this thread, pulled from these incredibly disturbing, fragmented records. It starts with the secret bargain, trading human lives for alien tech.
Moves through this vast, hidden program of consciousness harvesting, alien hybridization.
All masked by this global distortion field, the veil, which these documents suggest wasn't just out there in space, but woven into our reality, disguised as nature itself.
A system seemingly built not just to observe or interact, but to farm human consciousness, to recycle it, repackage it, for purposes we can barely guess at from these files.
So if these recovered records, this Operation Shatter-point Delta material, if it hints at that kind of system, a hidden control mechanism built right into the world you perceive.
Then what other natural phenomena, what other parts of our reality might be hiding something far more complex, far more unsettling?
What happens? What happens when the cattle start to remember?